So I believe there's been a legendary announcement lately when it comes to Zebec, and the reason why is because they recently achieved something for the first time ever in their history. Case in point, Zebec made an announcement saying how their first card funded by stocks has basically happened. This is pretty impressive, and let me explain why in today's video. Even though I am not telling anyone to do anything, nothing I say is financial advice, and this is just my personal perspective and review. So again, this is pretty monumental when it comes to Zebec because could you imagine, right? They recently announced a partnership with ICM. Now, basically what this allows to do, right, is that when it comes to these cards that it has in partnership with ICM, it kind of allows stocks to be spent instead of like actual fiat, if that kind of makes sense. In a sense where, it's like for instance, when I go to Taco Bell or Sizzler and I give my card, like I'm spending my actual fiat, right? Like in the traditional sense. However, what this allows for, again, this recent partnership with ICM and as well as Zebec, is that instead of spending the actual hypothetical fiat, it's like spending the stock, right? So like the stock holding. For instance, stocks including like Nvidia, Microsoft, Apple, and all this. So it's like imagine I go to Sizzler, I go and pay for my food, and then instead of actually using my fiat, it's using whatever stocks I have in like Apple or Nvidia or whatever, something like that. That's just kind of what is meant by this, right? And again, this marks the first ever time Zebec has had its card funded by stocks. You know what I mean? So this is like one of the biggest accomplishments it's achieved so far, at least in terms of the cards. It marks like a monumental milestone for it. So again, when people like to tell me Zebec's kind of doing nothing, well, that's apparently not the case. And this right here is going to set an example. It's going to set a precedent for what Zebec could do moving forward. Because again, if we take a look at Zebec, in the past, in terms of the cards, it's partnered with like memes, for instance, in the case of like Pepe and all this, it's partnered with some more serious projects too. But for the most part, it was just kind of like the normal stuff that was going on when it comes to the space. So it was nothing really that special. But again, this actually is pretty fantastic because this is like the first time ever they have a card that's funded by a stock, right? Not some random meme, not some random project, but by actual stocks. And it's going to do that in collaboration with something called ICM. So I find this to be pretty interesting. And again, this could set an example for what Zebec could do moving forward because don't you think there are other projects out there that might take a look at this and say, hey, you know what? I didn't realize that was possible when it comes to Zebec. It's like, for instance, when I take a look at videos on how to cook and all this, sometimes I think to myself, whoa, I didn't know you could cook like that, right? Or let's say I watch a video on how people like prepare food. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, I didn't even think about that. It just gives like another perspective into something. You know what I mean? It's like, for instance, I remember I was like watching a video on like how to cook eggs and all this, and then some people use like the microwave, some people use this and that or whatever. There are like multiple ways. So it just sometimes we don't really think about something, and then we watch a video and we watch, some people do it, and we're like, oh wow, I can't believe you could do that. It's kind of no different here in a sense where now some of these enterprises, some of these massive projects can take a look at this and say, hey, you know what, that's actually possible through Zebec. Why not have a partnership with them? Sometimes they might think that way, right? Just because now through this, they could see what's hypothetically feasible through Zebec. I find this pretty impressive, and keep in mind, this is just adding more and more to the resume, so to speak, when it comes to Zebec. Zebec already has a partnership with Ripple and Stellar. That's like an end game type of partnership, like the Avengers end game. It's kind of like that. Having a partnership with Stellar and Ripple, that's a game set match right there. I mean, they can't really top that, right? So of course, moving forward, they really need to be innovative to kind of, maintain their presence. And so far, this recent announcement, I thought it was quite legendary, actually. It's probably not as cool as the Ripple and Stellar partnership announcement, but it's a pretty monumental one at that because it's the first time Zebec has ever done it in its history. So I find that pretty fantastic. Just for Zebec specifically, right? I'm not talking about for like projects overall. I'm just talking about Zebec more specifically in terms of the achievement it achieved not that long ago. But yeah, people like to tell me though, well, the price isn't doing much. Why do you think this even matters? Well, again, this is not supposed to affect the price anyways. The reason why I say that is because as of right now, the market isn't doing the best. So, of course, naturally, a partnership announcement or a monumental change when it comes to Zebec isn't going to do much to the price. But it doesn't mean that it's not going to matter at all eventually, maybe later, just because if the market were to take off, sometimes people take a look back at this and they take a look at, hey, what has the project achieved? And then this type of stuff starts mattering later on. So not everything is supposed to matter instantly. Keep in mind, a project developing and improving does not equal good demand. So when people like to tell me, well, Zebec has done this, they've done that, why isn't the price like moving? Well, it doesn't mean it has good demand just because it improved. In order for good demand to actually be there, the market has to first of all change and actually improve, which we haven't seen yet in a massive way. So of course, naturally, this type of stuff won't really matter. It's like, for instance, let's say, I opened up a store in the middle of nowhere and I'm selling flannels, and like I can't find anyone to sell it to. Then at that point, it doesn't even matter how good the flannel is, like, the one I'm using right now. It just won't really sell if there isn't anyone there. However, if let's say, there was a big city that was built there or whatever, then yeah, it's going to start mattering. Then, it's going to really matter, especially if the demand for flannels are there. It's kind of no different here. Zebec, as of right now, it's the equivalent of selling flannels in the middle of nowhere. The sentiment has to go back in first before it could matter. That is the way to take a look at it. But again, we've seen time and time again that a bear market isn't necessarily permanent when it comes to this space. Things can go down or even in the opposite direction, but usually a bear market isn't permanent when it comes to this space, historically at least. Projects can come and go, but I've just never seen a permanent bear market ever when it comes to this. And still, when it comes to Zebec, it's approximately around 3 times away from its peak last year, so not much has changed when it comes to that ever since my last video. But imagine, right, if Zebec could go back to its peak last year, which is a known baseline, by the way. It's not something it's never achieved before. A 540 million market cap is a known achievement when it comes to Zebec. It achieved it last year. So when people like to tell me, why do you keep comparing it to that? Well, it's because that's a known baseline. You know what I mean? And again, Zebec, it's around 3 times away from a known baseline it's achieved before. Again, it just kind of showcases how low Zebec is in comparison to its peak last year. That's it. Which I don't really mind because I don't mind the dip. That's the thing. But, at the end of the day, when I take a look at the updates, when it comes to Zebec, when I take a look at what they've achieved recently, it's quite impressive because they don't have to do this. Like, who's clamoring, right? Who is like saying, oh, we need a card funded by stocks when it comes to Zebec? No one's really asking for that. But the fact that Zebec has the sort of, I guess, foresight to even care about this, or should I say kind of the intent to care about something like this, it's quite legendary, and it kind of showcases that they're thinking outside the box, right? It showcases that they're preparing instead of reacting. It's preemptive because who knows if this could be a big demand moving forward. We just don't know, right? So I guess they're just, achieving things left, right, and center and seeing, hey, you know what? We're going to achieve this. We're going to do this. We're going to do whatever. We're going to see what happens. And I like that mindset because it showcases that they're not necessarily giving up per se. It kind of showcases that they still have that motivation and that enthusiasm. Imagine, right, Simon, who is the CEO of Zebec. Could you just think about for a second, right? Let's just imagine his enthusiasm, his level of drive, his stamina, in order to be able to be that laser focused when it comes to a project like this at a time like right now when the market isn't doing the best. Pretty tough, in my opinion. And the fact that he still has that drive and energy to still care, wow, that really is fantastic in my opinion. But yeah, when it comes to this, I'm still waiting though, I'm still holding. However, I'm not telling anyone to do anything, and I'll be sure to make more updates moving forward when it comes to Zebec. So I want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a very awesome day. It's been Lee the Captain.